Hi, my name is Joey Sheaff, and this is my speech. I entitled it, First Things First, How to Use the First Amendment to the Best of Our Abilities. And my main purpose for giving this speech is to reevaluate the First Amendment and really come to a better understanding of what rights we have as American citizens under the First Amendment. So let's get started. What is the issue? What are my personal beliefs? George Washington once said, "If the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter." Now, I'm going to read the First Amendment from this pamphlet. It has the full Constitution of the United States in it. And the First Amendment says, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." So that is the original writing of the First Amendment. My beliefs as far as the First Amendment go, the freedom of speech covers both verbal and nonverbal communication, and nonverbal communication has to do with writing, art, music, actions, and everything in between, where verbal communication obviously has to do with speech, conversations, phone calls, etc. And we deal with the consequences and successes and failures of our exercising of the freedom of speech. Now, before we go spouting off to others that they're infringing on our freedom of speech, or before we go calling on the government to save us, let's have a deeper understanding of the First Amendment, which is what I hope we will get out of this speech. Moving right along, what is the history of the amendment? What does each part of the amendment mean for the individual American citizen? The amendment was passed in 1789 and ratified 2 years later in 1791. Lee Morrissey, in his essay toward an archaeology of the First Amendment's free speech protections, says that, quote, "This crucial paragraph brings together a series of rights, each of which could do just as well and represent its own amendment in the Constitution." And so what he basically means is that every category of the First Amendment, religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition, could all be their own amendment because they are all individually important to the Constitution. But they all work together to combine what is freedom of speech. So, what does the freedom of religion, let me go back one, there are two clauses which protect freedom to exercise religion. That is the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. The Establishment Clause says that the government cannot promote one religion over another, nor can it pass legislation to establish a national religion. And Free Exercise Clause says that the government cannot prohibit us from exercising whatever faith walk we adhere to, whether that be publicly or privately. Moving right along, freedom of speech. Let me move back one more time, sorry. Freedom of speech covers spoken, written, and nonverbal communication. Spoken communication has to do with speeches, text conversations, blog posts, newspaper articles, etc. Sorry, that's written communication. Spoken communication has to do with conversations, private conversations, speeches, etc. And then nonverbal communications are any sort of action that we take to express a certain idea that we adhere to. A.J. Willingham in one CNN article reports that, quote, "For example, if you invite someone to speak on your campus and you are a public university, you have to respect that individual's right to speak. Everyone has a right to express what they believe, whether or not it's offensive to someone else or whether or not one person agrees with it." Moving right along, the freedom of press. Annenberg says that this amendment, quote, "allows citizens to express and to be exposed to a wide range of opinions and views." Annenberg also says, though, that the Supreme Court has ruled that the government, quote, "may be allowed to limit the press because of libel, obscenity, fighting words, and words that incite violence and present a clear and present danger of inciting violence." But that is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does not actually have the power to pass legislation. They can only present their own well-advised, logical opinions, and the Congress can do with that what they may. Moving right along, freedom of assembly. The government cannot infringe on a group's right to assemble so long as they do not gather for the intent of, quote, "unlawful assembly," which is, quote, "when 3 or more people meet with the intention of carrying out an unlawful act or deliberately disturbing the peace." And that comes from the Cornell Law School. And moving right along, lastly, freedom of petitioning. The government cannot deny a group's petition of the government. This ranges from, quote, signing a petition to filing a lawsuit against the government. And that comes from Annenberg as well. And so it's up to us to use these rights from the First Amendment to better ourselves and better our society. But how can we do that? So let's finally move right along. What do we do about the First Amendment? How can we use this amendment to the best of our abilities? There are 3 ways I believe we can improve ourselves through the use of the First Amendment. We need to have more conversations. We need to be more open to what others have to say, and we need to know how much we're protected, because all 3 are vitally important. Paul Passavant says in his book that, quote, the freedoms of speech, press, and assembly are the rights of the people, meaning we are all definitely protected by the First Amendment in all senses of freedom of speech. Let's move right along. If we can do these 3 things, we can improve ourselves and our society drastically. And how much greater would this nation be if we could adopt a more civil approach to using our free speech for more good than evil? Moving right along. What would our nation look like if we took the First Amendment seriously for what it is? And what would our nation look like if we didn't take the First Amendment seriously? Imagine if our nation understood the full measure of the First Amendment and comprehended what it truly protected us from and what it truly condemned. Race relations would not be in such a decline, because we would have more open conversations. Media would return to what it was always meant to do: report the news, not push this biased narrative on both sides. Threats of violence and death because of political ideological differences would all but subside. Now, moving right along, imagine if our nation continued down the path it is going without taking a closer look at what the First Amendment was really all about. A degradation in free speech means a degradation in all other areas of our lives. The government will be able to control what we say, how we say it, when we say it, where we say it. Our nation will become George Orwell's prophetic book, 1984. Moving right along, Shauna Schifrin in her book Speech Matters says, quote, sincere and free expression plays a special role in the development of the mind, and the opportunity to engage in free-ranging, sincere communication is an essential condition for the revelation of information necessary to execute our duties to one another. What she basically means is that free speech is vital to the construction and maintenance of a free, altruistic society. And that is the First Amendment. That is the most important amendment added to the Constitution. So, which of these 2 scenarios seems like the better choice? I would hope that the first scenario seems like the one we want to move forward to. Moving right along. What can I do? What can the individual do? We each have the power to impact those around us for the better. The First Amendment affords us opportunities to say what we want to say, believe what we want to believe, write what we want to write, and print what we want to print, assemble where we want to assemble, and petition what we believe needs to be petitioned. Greta Van Susteren in one USA Today article urges us to, quote, not forget the First Amendment, adding that, quote, free speech matters now more than ever. Let's move right along. Lastly, after all, utilizing our freedoms instead of forcing others to abandon them allows for all of us to be free, and the United States has always been and will forever be the land of the free. Thank you very much. And then we have some bibliography to go. Thank you.